Good morning, everybody. This is Tele-Aviacion, and welcome to This Week in El Salvador. This is very interesting because I happen to be in El Salvador, just arrived yesterday, and it's a really exciting time here. We'll pretty much discuss issues directly affecting El Salvador, but first, I'd like to talk just a little bit about one of the major issues, the monetary system, which of course is creating many waves here around the world and creating lots of misunderstandings about El Salvador's position as far as Bitcoin is concerned. So I think it's really important to discuss what is the American dollar, because that's the big issue. That is what all the fight is about. That's probably everything that you see, every bit of bad propaganda that you see against El Salvador has really to do with the American dollar. Realize that since the dollar since we went off the gold standard in 1971, it changed everything. At one time the dollar was backed by gold. During the 1940s, it was backed by gold. There was a point where FDR put out a requirement through the Congress that they were going to confiscate all of the gold because they needed more gold. Because at that time, the monetary system, the dollar, was actually backed by gold. At least during the Great Depression, it was roughly 40%, and they tried to maintain that throughout the war. But then, of course, after World War II, that inflated currency, that changed that dynamic and that percentage of gold backing. Then by the time 1971 came about, probably maybe 20% was backed by gold of the actual outstanding currency. Now it's estimated to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 trillion. I know that's quite a big, huge step. A national debt. Back in the 70s, when I was in my formidable years, when dinosaurs ruled the earth, the average amount, I think the national debt was in the billions. Of course, now obviously it's in the trillions. But this is what happened when the Federal Reserve and the Treasury went amok. And then they changed all the dynamics of how we really determine what is the dollar. At one time, the dollar was just literally backed by gold. Well, now it's many things. It's important to realize the euro dollar. After the euro dollar actually came into prominence prior to 71, but where a lot of European allies started really collecting dollars because it was considered a great form of investment. The dollar is still the strongest investment. Well, we've discussed why it is the strongest investment, because the people based on the Bretton Woods agreements, the dollar is king currency. The whole world, except for Russia and China, as we're finding out more in the news, is totally governed by the dollar. Everything, when you buy oil in Saudi Arabia, you have to convert all of your money into dollars before you can buy oil. So that, of course, helps to prop up the American dollar and make it very strong. So of all the most inflationary currencies, the dollar is the least, even though we're having massive inflation here. So you have the euro dollar. I just discussed the petrodollar. Then you just have the stock market itself, which is incredibly intermingled with all the finances of the world, and therefore is part of the dollar. Part of what causes the dollar to be strong has to do with the stock market. You have the commodities markets, and we're finding a lot of waves. A lot of waves are being made on the commodities market these days. When you consider what's happening in Russia, you consider a lot of the commodities, the wheat, the oil, all energy types of materials are taken off the market, at least as far as the rest of the world is concerned. I'm sure between Russia and still a good part of Western Europe and China, there's still a lot of trading, but commodities has created a very interesting situation, which could very well unseat the dollar as the prevailing currency. It could end up turning into the Chinese yuan. It really depends, but I think that's in the future and not so distant future. Then of course there's the futures markets. That's a big area where the dollar is manipulated. The futures markets within currency markets, Then, of course, consider another big part of the dollar is the Federal Reserve banks, the 12 Federal Reserve banks around the country. I should say, they basically have a board of governors that then, is monitored by the Federal Reserve. They get together, they determine interest rates. That's how we do things. No more backed by gold. And so you have the bond market. Bond is a big, huge market where the Federal Reserve, when they want to create, how should I say, when they lessen liquidity, what they're going to do is they're going to sell more bonds. Who would buy them? Good question. But they're going to sell more bonds. Probably the banks, parts of the Federal Reserve will buy those. And what they'll buy those with is dollars, and then those dollars go back to the Federal Reserve, thereby shrinking the money supply. And that's what's happening right now. As we've created extra interest rates, in theory, that gives the incentive, assuming the interest rates are good enough, the banks, of members of the 12 Federal Reserve banks will start buying these bonds, and they will start putting money back, giving money back to the Federal Reserve, thereby lessening the amount of liquidity, theoretically getting rid of the inflation problem. That's going to be difficult, but that's what it's for. Then you have the repo markets. And the repo markets are fascinating because they allow the overnight banks or the banks to be able to borrow money so that they can maintain their 10% fractional reserve of money. And there may be different dealings that they have that the Federal Reserve requires of all the banks, but they need to do this in case there's a big run on the bank. They need to make sure that there's enough money around here. Strangely enough, differing from just the way the banks are doing it, even the exchanges that are selling Bitcoin and all currencies, they are also borrowing amongst each other, which is fascinating. Recent articles have discussed this. Even though it's more speculation as to what they're doing, they're probably doing things similar to what the federal banks are doing, in the sense that they are borrowing from each other. So if you have invested in Bitcoin, in Coinbase, or Gemini, or Kraken, or any of the many, probably 14 major exchanges out there, there is a very, very good chance that you are not taking back your currency. Remember, not your keys, not your coins. When you have your cryptocurrency, your Bitcoin, in one of those banks, what's happening is they are using that money for something. Probably using it to create some sort of a basis for the naked shorts. Again, shorting the market to be able to create an artificial demand or lack of demand, let's say, on Bitcoin, making it actually appear to be shrinking. Even though it's obvious that incredible amounts of people are hodling it, and big, huge whales are hodling it, but because of these naked shorts, in order to back these up, they need some sort of monetary basis. And so I believe that these exchanges are using their own Bitcoin to be able to back up these shorts, to be able to help the United States government short the market in order to create an artificial supply, greater supply of Bitcoin. And supply and demand, the greater the supply, generally the less demand. The greater the demand, the less supply. Well, now we have an artificial supply of Bitcoin on the market, probably being able to maintain that through the same methodology for which the federal government is allowing people in the repo markets to temporarily give their bank, at least the overnight, the amount of liquidity that they need in case there was a run on the bank. Now, this is really scary, and this, of course, is the fundamental difference between Bitcoin and the other alt currencies, is that Bitcoin is its own immutable sovereignty. It does not require it does not require all of these other support teams that support and ICOs that support Ethereum and Bitcoin Cash and all of these others. It doesn't require that. It's on its own. It just literally has the node holders and the people that have the nodes, and the people that do the mining, and the nodes keep the miners You know, keep them in check. They all keep each other in check. It's like an organism that is immutable, cannot be affected by governments, which is why Bitcoin is such an incredible investment. But what's happening is the other alt currencies are creating their own mini little federal reserves. Exactly the point that Nakamoto was trying to get away from. This idea of having a reserve where it's basically based on debt. This is what all of these other types of alt currencies are doing. And this is really, I mean, it's really scary when you think of it, because the whole point is being lost on people as to why was Bitcoin even invented in the first place. It was to help people be sovereign unto themselves and keep their own currency without having to worry about if they have over, you know, their savings over $250,000 in a bank. Everything but the $250,000 is guaranteed, and then of course the Fed can just have the Treasury print more money to cover the rest of the $250,000, putting even worse inflation. But in any case, not to diverge too much on this subject. So we have precious metals market. Oh boy, this has been manipulated since we went off actually even before we went off the gold standard in 1971. It's been manipulated. But in fact, there was a big suit through Kitco suing the federal government over the way that they were manipulating gold. And the court determination was, through the Bretton Woods Agreement, they have every right to manipulate gold. It's perfectly legal. They can manipulate anything to make sure that the dollar stays on top of the food chain. That's the way it is. I wish it wasn't that way, but that's just the way it is. So when and then also consider some of the other issues that are happening. Supposedly banks are against alt currencies, but one of the biggest banks, Chase Bank, has extensive investments in Ethereum-based products. So I really seriously believe that Ethereum is ultimately going to be used, and Ethereum products and different altcoins based on Ethereum are going to ultimately be used to the demise of Bitcoin. I don't believe it will succeed, but people get confused. They think it's all the same, and it isn't. Bitcoin is totally different than all of them. But that's the issue. So I guess, I mean, I preface with all of this point because it is this exact aspect of the financial system that is creating the problems and is causing the type of bad press that we're getting on El Salvador, because El Salvador has dared to go against against the world, against the United States and Western Europe, has dared to go against them and actually try to get a currency that can help them get ahead. And if this fire spreads, as it is, to many of the other Latin American countries and African countries and South American countries, if this spreads, it is going to create a lot of problems with the dollar. And of course, understanding this, the military, in Bitcoin we have what's called the proof of work. Well, in the United States dollar we have what's called proof of war. What does proof of war mean? Well, it means that it is backed by the possibility of war. You go against the dollar, there's a possibility that you are basically going to have to face the military-industrial complex. And it's through that, and through their connection to the news media, that we're getting all of this bad, incredible press about El Salvador and about any country that dares to go off of the world standard and have their own immutable sovereign currency. And so then we talk about Bukele, all the incredible negative news, Nayib Bukele, that is coming out against him. And it's all absolute fabricated nonsense, mostly fabricated, I should say, by the Open Society led by George Soros and his team of ne'er-do-wells that simply are apologists and help to support the International Monetary Fund so that they can go and find more and more countries to basically get involved in our currency. And every country that has ever gotten involved with the IMF has always ended up worse for wears as a result. Many of their leaders who ended up stealing all the money, well, they probably ended up doing very well as a result. But the rest of the populace that has ever been theoretically having some sort of a result or positive outcome of IMF. There's never been a positive outcome. It always ends up exploiting the country. And this is the sort of thing that El Salvador does not want to have to deal with, because they've had many dealings with the United States, and for the most part, they have not been positive and have not helped the El Salvadorian people. Possibly the fact that at least El Salvador uses the dollar has probably helped it from getting really in really bad shape, because at least the dollar, because it's manipulated, is not as inflationary as every other currency on the world, with the exception of Bitcoin. But let's look at the kind of leader, because so many things have been said, and things that really, really bad, horrible things have been said. I mean, hate speech supposedly is outlawed by Twitter and everything, unless it's hate speech against Bukele or hate speech against Russia or any country that supports Russia. Other than that, hate speech is bad. Well, there's been a lot of hate speech about Bukele and burning of effigies, talked about, and there are now Al Jazeera and some of the Western press is even mentioning El Faro. Sometimes they just avoid mentioning it to act like they actually have their own mind and their own opinion on the matter. But the fact is the news media does not really care about the truth. They just see something that is popular in print, probably done by, sponsored by the U.S. Military-industrial complex that has information in the New York Times, or the LA Times, or the Wall Street Journal. And then Al Jazeera reports on the same exact thing. They don't even bother to change the wording. They just print it exactly the way that it's written. But let's go back and consider, it was quite a few months ago, I think it was about 6 months ago, when Nayib Bukele, he talked to the people of El Mozote, where there was a horrible massacre in the 80s. Thousands of people, small village, and thousands of children, and I should say people, I'm not sure the combination, but a lot of children just viciously murdered. This is, and he talked about this, and you could hear the passion and the sadness in his voice about that, and that how important it is to help people in this country, to help them get ahead for once, and not have to deal with the incredible sadness of the military-industrial complex, because this country has really suffered as a result of the military-industrial complex. And in fact, it was those people that killed the soldiers that killed all these people in El Mozote that were sponsored by the United States. This is why there's a tremendous amount of distrust in this country for that whenever the United States wants to help El Salvador, help them. There's a tremendous distrust about it. When Joe Biden talks about Latin America being the backyard of the United States, bullshit. And Bukele points out that bullshit, and believe me, they don't like it. But when you consider the way that he spoke, and the incredible determination and sadness in his voice of how he does not want that to happen to the El Salvadorian people. And there is no greater commitment to education than what he has shown. Everybody has all the children in their studying have computers. Not just healthy children, people with special needs, people with Down syndrome, people that are blind have computers. These computers cost thousands of dollars. This is his commitment to education. What country is doing this? If this is a brutal dictator, what country is having this effect on it? Just imagine. And one of the biggest things that I'm reading all the time, I mean, this is an amazing point. The Western press comments on how Bitcoin has gone down so much that it's affecting the El Salvadorian economy, and that he's made a bad bet on Bitcoin, and it's gone down 45% or 30% or whatever. It doesn't matter. Just it's gone down, and he's just a laughing stock. That's the way they make it sound in the world. What they don't make it sound, he's not investing the amount of Bitcoin that Michael Saylor or Elon Musk is investing in their companies. No, they have billions of dollars of Bitcoin. At most, El Salvador has 2,000 Bitcoin, estimated probably purchased for right around maybe, let's say, $100 million. Well, the gross national product or domestic product of El Salvador is about roughly $22 billion. It's estimated that 20% of that is the actual tax base, which is right around $4 billion. Well, $100 million is about 2 to 3% of $4 billion. That's their tax base. So he's risking 2 to 3%. By golly, that's like Berkshire Hathaway buying 2 to 3% of this stock, 2 to 3% of that stock. He's not totally taking every bit of money there is and putting in Bitcoin. No, what he's doing is he's dollar cost averaging. He's being smart. He's assuming that Bitcoin, the very action of the way that he did it, and not just him, the whole Tele-Aviacion, because they're responsible for this, are creating this, assuming that it's probably going to go down. Why do they think it's going to go down? Because they know that the United States is going to do all they can do to make it lower and to try to make a laughingstock of him and every other nation that would dare to adopt Bitcoin. They know this. And so they are causing it to go down. And he understands that fundamentally. So he's been buying a little bit here and there on the dips. But I can guarantee you when it goes down further, he's going to buy even more. And so what if El Salvador is 5% of their yearly, tax base is gradually spent in collecting Bitcoin? It's only going to help the country, but it's not like he's risking everything. It's not like everything is being risked the way that the rest of the world media, in such incredible hypocrisy and hyperbole, to make it sound like it's such a big deal. They act like he's invested billions and billions of dollars. No, it hasn't been done. The rest of the world, if you just Google it, you'll find out that hasn't been done. But this is what's being quoted in the media, and it's all bullshit. So, and just on a personal note again, about the man, Bukele. Many people don't realize this. There was a really, really great cartoonist. His name was Hugo Nelson Serrano. Great cartoonist. He died in May of just a year ago. This man made the most incredible cartoons. He not only did all the illustration for them, he did all the voices, he did every aspect of the production of them. He did them himself, and they were funny. I don't even speak the language. I should. Pure laziness on my own part. But they were really funny. Even to a person who didn't fully understand everything, they were incredible. This man was an incredible genius, noted from El Salvador, and Hugo Nelson Serrano, and known all around South America and Latin America, and praised. And he got cancer in the 2020s. And when Nayib Bukele found out about it, he gave him the best medical care that you could get. Unfortunately, it was too late, but he did, because Bukele has a heart. And not just him, but the people that back him up, the incredible people of the assembly, especially, thank God, the 55 or 50 to 60 members of the Nuevas Ideas parties. They back him up. They have his back, but they all have a singular vision to really advance this country. And there is incredible heart. For once, maybe we can have a little bit of corazon, a little bit of heart that cares about what's happening in this country, and that wants to help all the children, all the handicapped children, blind children. They want to help everybody, and it's this generation that's going to make such a tremendous difference in what happens with Bitcoin. And then, of course, all of the horrible things that have been said about him with regard to the gangs, the MS-13 and the Barrio 18 gangs, known by also there's many other names for them, but it is so important that we stop this activity. And the martial law that has had to have been created here to stop it is an absolute necessity, because, as is typical, these gangs started in LA, in California, the United States, and many of these members, when they were caught by immigration and would have had to face the legal implications in the United States, were simply deported back to El Salvador, where they could continue their nefarious activities. Not even deported and brought back to the authorities, but many of them were just literally brought back to El Salvador to do whatever business they did. That's how much the United States cares about Latin America and about El Salvador. And this is the way they handle things. In other words, there is no caring about it. It's if the United States, maybe there are a few people in Congress that care a little bit, but they're so burdened by so many other issues, probably caused by the Federal Reserve and problems caused by the military-industrial complex. They don't have enough time to care about El Salvador. So it's about time that El Salvador starts caring about itself, and that's what's happening. So just to look at some of the news, amazing. Al Jazeera, like I say, starts talking about El Faro and how they're their main news source. Again, El Faro, Bitcoin loses tens of millions of dollars. Oh, they love to do that. Again, less than maybe possibly probably 2% of all the dollars that are received in the tax base are invested in Bitcoin. Nayib Bukele, all in on crypto, and of course they try to make it sound like, oh, a total laughingstock. All nonsense. They blame, they talk about, again, Deutsche Welle. Even they are joining in on the rant against El Salvador. This news media has just gone out of hand. What they're trying to do is they're trying to generate consent to have some sort of action against El Salvador. Exactly what action, it's hard to know, but I can guarantee you it's not for the good of El Salvador. So I leave you with this. I'm going to be reporting. We're going to be going to La Union and then later to San Salvador. Right now I'm actually at the near the airport, and we're getting ready to go on our journey, but I'm going to be reporting probably many times this week. So thank you so much for joining me, and have a beautiful day. Thank you.